Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask Anything presented by Mosher Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Mosher's Director of Personnel. We're happy that you could join us for this special episode of Ask Anything because today we're talking with Philip Smith about the Filipino American life. Philip Smith was born in Pangasinan, Philippines, and was adopted by Americans. He resides in Indianapolis and is a founder of the Philippine Cultural Community Center, AAPI Pride, and the Kitchen of Culture. He is dedicated to public service and community service. He has a loving husband and a daughter. Philip was also a foster parent of 7 children that have all been reunited with their families. He's an avid gardener and enjoys baking and traveling in his free time. Before we begin, let's welcome our guest, Philip Smith. Philip, how are you?
I thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you, and we're gonna get to the subject at hand really quickly. But I want to start with asking you about your story. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a adopted Filipino American. I was adopted when I was 2 weeks old, born in the Philippines and adopted by white missionaries, American missionaries that resettled here once they were done with their mission. Resettled in Indianapolis and grew up in a white household, white neighborhood, white school, church. I joined the military, the U.S. Navy, and that was when Filipino culture just really hit me. And I went to go find my birth family after I left the Navy. And about 2010, I found them and went to go live there to see what my life would be like if I wasn't adopted. I lived there for about a year, and I worked at a call center, worked as a jeepney conductor. And then I came back with a better understanding of my culture, my heritage, and the values in the Philippines, and got together with some friends here and said, hey, we need a home away from home. So let's create a community center that we always wanted. And in 2020, December 2020, that's what we did. And we've been around since then.
All right, that's a heck of a story. I want to ask you about going back. How was that for you?
Going back to the Philippines for the first time in, let's say, 25 years, 28 years, it was a culture shock for sure. It was a roller coaster of emotions. Approaching my family that essentially just basically kind of like gave me up and gave me up for adoption, and tasting the foods, understanding the family dynamic, understanding work life there. It was definitely a humbling experience and a blessing. And again, definitely a mixed bag of emotions, but it did complete me and answered a lot of questions about who I am, my identity.
That's very good to hear that it helped you answer some questions and that it gave you some clarity about your identity and who you are. So, as a Filipino American, how do you balance your dual identity? What challenges have you encountered?
When I was younger, being a Filipino American was really first introduced to me when I was 6 years old. My mother was a teacher at this private school, and I attended that private school. And someone cut me in line as a line leader. And so, I was upset. Hey, I'm the line leader this time, not you. And I said, I'm going to tell my mom on you. And someone said, well, who's your mom? I said, Miss Smith. She's a teacher there. And the student was like, she's not your mom. She's white. And that really kind of started the wheels of thinking of like, who am I? I remember going home that evening after school and just going upstairs to the bathroom and try and wash my skin off, my color off, to see if I could be my mom. And that's my mom. I grew up with her. That's the only person I know as my mother. Going to like restaurants or places where they ask you if the bill is separate or together,
Yeah.
obviously 10-year-old, 12-year-old can't pay the bill by himself. So, or even you go in the checkout lane, like, is this together? That your groceries together? So that was always a question that was put in my mind by others, like, who am I? Do I belong here? In college, is this kind of like the sticking point of the needle that broke the camel's back, in the sense is that in college you go to these friends' houses for holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. And I remember walking down the stairwell at one of my friend's house, and I saw the family photo, and everyone kind of looked alike. They had like the same bridge nose, the same space between their eyes, same facial structure. And that's when I was like, huh, who really am I? And if I looked at my family photo back in college, I was the only one that kind of stuck a sore thumb. And that's when it just like, wow, like I need to find my family. But it was so expensive to fly over there, like 12, 1500. The flight's like 24-hour flight. And in all aspect, there was no social work for my case. It was during 1986 People's Power Revolution. So all the paperwork has kind of been turned upside down. And
Right.
so just somewhere to look for them, the only thing I could think of was social media. So I went on Facebook, typed in the information of my original last name and family, and someone messaged me back, American, and said, "Hey, I'm going over there right now to do a medical mission. I can look for you." And for me, I was like, "Oh, who is this person? Like, are they trying to ask for money?" And
Right.
so, like, okay, sure, I'll give you some more information about my family. About 2 or 3 months passed, and they're like, "Yeah, I found your brother. He wants to talk to you." And so, like, what, really? And so my brother didn't understand a lick of English, and so it was very difficult to play charades over the phone of trying to explain, who I am and I've been looking for you. So once that connection was made and the weekly phone calls were exchanged, I left the Navy and I had enough money to actually purchase a ticket and go there and visit. And once I was there, it was definitely a I was full of anger, I was full of sadness, I was happy. It was everything. But my mother there said to me, like, I'm glad you found us. We've been looking for you for 28, 29 years. And traditionally, when you go over there to the Philippines to see family, you're supposed to bring them like a souvenir from your wherever you reside. And my tour guide, my friend, went with me. He was like, "Yeah, you should get something for your family." And I'm like, "I really don't want to because I don't know them. I don't want them to think I'm
Right.
rich." So I got stuff that was like made in USA, like towels and soap, Irish Springs, things like that. And I started giving to my mom. I was like, here's some vitamins for you. And like, complete stranger, right? Cut me off from their lives for like was 2 weeks. And she didn't know any English either. And when she started saying something, started crying while she was saying it, while I was handing her vitamins and towels and things like that. And she said, I don't care about all this stuff. I'm just glad you came back and you found us. And that really kind of like broke the wall of uncertainty of who is my family. And thinking about that now still brings a lot of emotions of why they gave me up. Why was I the only one out of a family of 7 to be given to complete strangers? Culturally, in the Philippines, we take care of our own in a sense. If someone can't take care of their son, daughter, usually like the aunt in the family comes in and takes care of them, or a distant cousin. And every time I leave the Philippines and visit my family, I always think about that because I'm like, why didn't you give me to, your sister, my
Mm-hmm.
aunt? Why did you let me go to complete strangers? And it was a lot of anger and a lot of questions still. But oddly enough, those questions were complete in some aspect. Come back here to the US, I was more comfortable now of who I am. My family here, they were apprehensive at first of me taking a trip over there to find my birth family, especially my mother here. And I had to sit down and talk to them. I'm like, hey, you are always my mom. And my mother now is an older mother. She's quite older than most mothers my age. And so she had me very late. And she had also 6 miscarriages too, in her personal time. And so her having me was probably the biggest blessing for her and for myself because she picked me.
Mm.
And that was probably a huge booster of self esteem and confidence. She could had someone else, but she picked me there in the Philippines. And so they understand my father, my brother here, and my mom. I still keep in have great relationship with them. My family in the Philippines, unfortunately, it has kind of our communication and our relationship kind of dissolved in a sense. But it was nonetheless a journey that I had to take for myself,
Right.
and a journey that I needed to take for myself.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you still go on trips over there, but I take it that you don't.
I do, but I don't really actively seek out my family there. I occasionally talk to my brother, one of my good brothers, and my sister, but I don't make a point to go to the island there. And I usually go see some other friends and just have a vacation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a very powerful story, honestly, from everything that you told us from the beginning as being a young child and going through what you went through. And then as you grew up and you saw the differences in your different friends' households and how you kind of grew up and understood that you wanted to make sure that you took that trip. So I definitely commend you for going back and really finding out everything that happened from that beginning and kind of getting some clarity around the situation and obviously understanding who you are now and what that led to you doing the things that you do now, which are very commendable. So it was a journey, as you said, that you needed to take, if anything, for your own so that you could understand who you were a lot better. Yeah, very powerful story.
And I think that kind of plays into why we also have the community center, the Filipino Cultural Community Center. Is when I came back here, I wanted that same aspect that was taken from me there.
Hmm.
Family is huge in the Philippines. Hospitality is big there too, and there, like, there's no stranger. Like, there's always a big brother. A stranger is a big brother or uncle, or a big sister or auntie. And so coming back here, trying to find a community that understood me and accepted me, because I don't speak the language.
Hmm.
I was still new to the culture itself. Example, my cousins over there are like your best friends, like your automatically best friends. You go on the street corner to the store and just drink there, or smoke something, or play cards. So you don't have to have electronics to be happy, right?
Right.
And so over here, my closest cousins are in like Detroit or Texas, and I want that sense of family. I want that sense of belongingness. I want that sense of friendship, that relationship. And as the Filipino Americans here, we've always wanted a place that we can gather and be ourselves and teach people about the Philippines and promote it and educate others. And so everyone has that talk, but no walk. And so I
Yeah.
was like, let's do it. Let's do it. So we started the community center back in 2020. It was 600 square feet. And now we're at 9,000 square feet after 4 years. So it's quite a huge adventure. I would say that if I wasn't adopted, if I didn't go see my family or find my adoption path, this community center probably wouldn't be here because it runs on the story of myself.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about first about how do you use your voice to address stereotypes, misconceptions, and promote positive representation?
There's a lot of education. Also being part of the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of stereotypes about Asian queers, or even the myth about the perfect model of a citizen, of an American citizen. There's misconception about that. And it's really a lot about educating the public and letting people be aware of, of who we are. One thing that people gather around and learn is food.
Yeah.
Everything comes around when there's food. And so what we've done here at the center is how we amplify our voice here is we find common ground with another culture, another community, and we build from there. Example, we have friendship days. Friendship days is when both countries officially recognize each other and have start diplomatic ties with each other. So they
Hmm.
kind of like traded. So we had Korean and Filipino Friendship Day last month, and it was really kind of cool to see that how the Koreans and the Filipinos kind of have not the same culture, but the same concept of things, you know.
Okay.
And also, we had a
Cool.
German there, a German American in the audience, and the Koreans were teaching us how to make kimchi, a cooking demonstration.
Yeah.
And one of the Germans was like, "Oh, that's how I make sauerkraut without the fish oil." And it was just really interesting to see how people can come together and find the similarities instead of differences, because there's a lot more similarities with each other than there are differences.
That's a cool story. And Brian and I can attest that food will bring us together for anything. So, quite frankly, I mean, whenever you guys are having Korean and Filipino food, count us in.
Yeah, I live in Brownsburg on the west side of Indianapolis, and there was a Filipino restaurant here in Brownsburg for a little bit. It was called Queen Egg Roll, and it was really good. I was very sad when I drove up one day, and I'm like, oh, they're not open anymore. Darn it! The different egg rolls and the with either rice or is it pancit or pancit?
Pancit rice noodles.
Pancit, yeah. It was. Oh my gosh, they're so good.
That's the thing is that there is no Filipino restaurant here in Marion County. The closest one is in Nashville, about an hour away, an hour and a half or so. And since there's no Filipino restaurant here, they either closed because of like the funding, or the kids didn't want to take it over. The rent's gone up high because of post-COVID inflation and such. It's just that is what gathers Filipinos together is food. And that is something that we can share with our neighbors. Everyone has to eat. And the best way to learn is for your stomach. And that is how we start the conversation. Like lumpia, which is the little egg rolls, it's Chinese influence. There's also some we have empanadas, and empanada is something that Mexico has.
Mm-hmm. I
And
mean, basically all the Caribbean.
we actually have a Filipino and Mexico Friendship Day, April 13th. We have a mariachi band coming to play the Philippine national anthem, which is kind of cool.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
and there's actually a town or a province in the Philippines that still has a Spanish dialect, and so we still have guapo and we still have Filipino pesos. That is from the colonial rule of 400 years. Like I said, there's a lot more similarities than there are differences within the community.
So let's stay on the topic of holidays. How do you celebrate Filipino holidays, festivals, or traditions while living here in the USA?
Our biggest holiday that we celebrate is Christmas.
Okay.
Christmas is our major holiday. It is on a Guinness World Record of one of the longest celebrations that we've had in the world. It starts in September, goes to
Oh,
October, November, and December. And then it stops in January during the Three Kings Festival. The month ends with BER, Burr. Then that's Christmas. September, October, November, December.
And then sign it up.
sign me up. Yeah. So can I ask you why is that? Why does it start in September?
We just a joyful community and very giving and
Okay.
generous. We don't have Thanksgiving there.
Right.
That's the Puritans. We have Halloween, but it's more of a Western thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We don't have fall there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and every Filipino likes to experience snow, Santa Claus, things like that, giving, the generosity of the community. And so September 1st, you hear Mariah Carey over the speaker, and
Wow.
you're like, oh, but yeah,
Wow. That's really hard, honestly.
that's the biggest holiday that we observe. About 89% of the Filipinos are Roman Catholic. And so they do celebrate all the saint holidays or festivals. There is a Mardi Gras version of a festival down there. It used to be celebrating like the sugar beets and the sugar harvest, but it just kind of transformed into like another Mardi Gras there in the Philippines. So it's
Okay.
really interesting. We have festivals there that depict Black baby Jesus, which is kind of Saint Nino, and also they do a reenactment of Jesus being crucified, like the whole thing. So that's how devoted and religious the Filipinos are there.
That's a lot. I gotta say, I mean, in Puerto Rico, we celebrate Christmas not from September, but really the day after Thanksgiving. I mean, of course, we are a part of the US, so we celebrate Thanksgiving, and then the day after we start our Christmas celebrations, and ours go beyond the Three Kings Day on January 6th. We go about to the third or fourth week of January, depending on how that weekend falls, because we have a huge festival in Old San Juan during that third or fourth weekend of January. It's called Festival de la Calle San Sebastián. It's basically San Sebastian Street Festival. It's a huge 4-day thing. And so that basically, once that's over, kind of Christmas dies down. We have another thing that we call Octavitas, which is kind of like the loosely translated in English is like saying the 8th week. So it's like our Christmas last 8th week. So the Octavitas are basically that last week where we continue celebration until it's over. So kind of similar, but not as much because you guys celebrate in September. We don't go back that far. But that's very interesting to hear all of your celebration and why you celebrate. I don't know that I would like to hear Mariah Carey singing All I Want for Christmas from September 1st all the way through early January, but I don't know. Maybe we could get used to it.
Yeah, that's a long time to survive if you're playing the Whamageddon game where you try
Yeah.
to avoid Last Christmas by Wham. That's an extended window. That's going to be real hard
Yeah.
to make it through.
Yeah, that is an extended window. That's kind of hard. So, Philip, how do you ensure living here in the US that your children or future generations maintain a connection to their Filipino roots?
That is a great question. My daughter she was born through surrogacy. And so she's half Filipino and half Ukrainian and Russian. And so that area. A little bit different with her is that she knows her bio mom and she knows, and I'm sure the question is not at forefront of who she is culturally or such, but we still need to acknowledge or respect the history of our parents, of where they came from, and the journey that they had to take. The best way that we, or I myself, can educate her is language, is speaking, teaching her the language, teaching her some of the values that they have there, teaching some of how she makes food. I've talked to her bio mom about her Russian side, Ukrainian side, and it's an understanding that culture is important, but she also has to carve her way in life.
Right.
And when she's here as an American, when in Rome, in a sense,
Right, right.
and it's just having the knowledge and the empathy of other cultures and awareness of other cultures around you. I think it would be a better way to be happy with oneself. I'm not pro Philippines or pro Ukrainian, in the sense of knowing which one's better or anything like that. At the end of the day, we're all human, right? We all want things in life, whether you be Canadian, Puerto Rican, Filipino, European. We all want a loving family to go home to, a safe neighborhood, and a livable wage. And core front, that is what we want in the Philippines. That's what we want here. And again, at the end of the day, we're all striving to be human.
Great. Great advice. Before we go, what cultural practices, stories, or recipes do you pass down to keep the Filipino legacy alive, especially through the community center that you built?
A lot of respect to the elders in the community, the loving family portion, the generosity, the hospitality. In the Filipino community back at home, of course, there's a lot of poor people, a lot of people in poverty. But if you just have one peso over there, you see a boy smiling, ear to ear, grinning. Money's not everything. Happiness is. And so that's something that I want to instill, is that with this community center, like we grew up in a different side of the world, right? If things were different, say if the US was over there in the Philippines and the Philippines were over here in the US, things would be a lot different. But it's not, because in the Philippines, basketball is a big thing over there.
Yep.
And over here in the US, or at least here in Indiana, football football nation or whatever. A football field, you need so many acreage for that. And basketball, you can have a basketball court right there in your bedroom. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't need that much space. So culturally or environmentally, we're different like that. If we switch spots, I'm sure it would be the same. Same thing with pork and steak. Like over here, steak and potatoes, the main course and such. And because we have the acreage, we have the farm, we have the space. Over there, people are living on top of each other, and they don't have the means of having that hectare, that acreage. And so pigs, so it's pork. And thus it comes with high blood pressure, which is something
Yeah.
that we also deal with. And so what I'm saying is like we're all human, and that things there's so many things that are similar and so many things that if people would understand and step out of their comfort zone or step out of their or would get a passport and just experience life
Yeah.
outside of the US or outside of Indiana, you understand why things are so environmentally different, culturally, also how people react, how people celebrate, how people value things. And so it's quite interesting to grasp that in a sense, especially if you're just here in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can agree with that. I've had the privilege of living overseas in a couple of different countries and visiting over 25, I would say now probably close to 30 on, for pleasure, for vacationing, etc. So you're absolutely right. If you only live in your bubble, to use a layman's term, you're only going to know what's inside that bubble. But once you break out and you start looking at things from the lenses of somebody else's eyes and you see how those people go about their lives and how they do their business, etc., then it gives you a different perspective and it really makes you grow up, not just there while you're there, but really when you go back home. I think it's when the really growing up starts to happen because now you can really appreciate all of the things that you have around you that you might take for granted because they're easily accessible, and I'm talking about things that we take for granted, like this bottle of water that I'm holding in my hand right now, that people in many other countries, they have to go down to a river to get that water to drink it. And it's not safe, but they do it because that's the only means that they have. So you bring up a great point about that, about putting on getting that, I should say, getting that passport and flying somewhere and really just kind of seeing how things are somewhere else.
What I'm very thankful is central air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. That,
And
Yeah.
heating. Yes.
In an earlier episode, we talked with the Guatemala Service Project folks, and just as Angel was saying, with just a bottle of water, just the amount of time and effort and energy that is involved in acquiring and then preparing potable water that won't make you at minimum sick or at worst kill
Mhm.
you. Just having readily accessible, clean, safe water
I'm
is
going
an amazing privilege.
one thing that I've noticed too is when I was over in the Philippines, they have calculators and mechanical pencils behind glass displays. And I never thought you would have mechanical pencils and calculators behind a glass display, but they're a commodity over there.
Yeah, no, it's different. And that's I think the overall message. I think is that once you experience some of those things, some of those hardships that you don't think are hardships, because here you can go to XYC brand store and grab a mechanical pencil off the shelf or a calculator for your daughter to go to school, to go to elementary school and not think about it twice. Those are the things that really make you go, like you said,
And,
it's a commodity for them. It's a luxury for us that we can just go to a store and grab it.
and I think that is something that we are also educating the general public on at the community center is that here in the US, we have this thinking that, oh, the way we're doing it is right. That
Right.
is the right way to do it. And what we're showing to the community is like there's different ways to do that, but you still have the same outcome. Something that we've struggled with is preparation of food and the ingredients to make the food. and educating the health department on those types of food and the ways to make it has been a struggle back and forth to let them understand that their way is not always the right way.
Yeah.
There's other ways to do it. And so showing that like what with the culture aspect, the language, and when people come through the front door, they kind of get mind blown. Like, oh wow, you guys, wow, that's same way that we do it. So, which is a great thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with that, we'd like to thank Philip Smith for joining us today to talk about the Filipino American life. Philip, it's been a pleasure to have you with us on Ask Anything. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Motion Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to Philip Smith talk to us about his journey living as a Filipino American. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts on what they're currently working on. Remember to send us your ideas or topics via our social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.